Welcome to another theme and video tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to go through some of the structural aspects of the grid. Now, if you watched part one of how to create portfolios, you already know how to create projects, create categories, and add them to the grid. So I just repeated the process we did in part one. I added more categories and I added more images here. So what I'm going to show in this tutorial is a few settings relating to the masonry aspect of the grid. I'm going to show you how to switch images to background images for each tile, how to switch from fixed to full width, manage the gutter sizes, and the number of columns. So let's jump straight into it here. I have, as you can see, a bunch of different sized images here, some regular landscape images, portrait images, a wide image here. And this is a traditional masonry grid. The images just stack under one another. But what we want to do is to create an evenly aligned grid. So if you remember in part one, we set the thumbnail sizes of each tile in the project. So let me just switch back and show you this quickly. For example, for portraits, we set this to portrait under grid item, thumbnail format and size. For wide image, I have set this to wide, obviously. And for landscape, this one, I've set this to large landscape. But if we turn back to the grid here, we can see that they're not actually taking those sizes, and the reason why is because their sizes have not been calculated. So let's show you how to do this. I'm going to switch to my grid here, and I'm going to scroll down to fixed thumbnail dimensions. So basically what this does, it gives each tile a fixed width and height, which allows us to give the tiles different sizes and place them differently throughout the grid. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to go ahead and save it, and we can see what this looks like. There we go. So we can see that we have the large landscape here, we have the wide image that takes up 2 columns, and it's starting to look better already. Obviously, I'm missing one image, but we can obviously change the columns to account for that as well. And the next thing I'm going to show you is how to use background image option. Now this becomes very useful, for example, if you haven't cropped your image properly, or let's say you just don't have the time to do it. So what I'm going to do here is go back to, let's see, I'm going to go back to this image here, which we set to large landscape, and I'm going to switch this one to portrait. And then we can see what happens here. There we go. So as we can see, we have the grid is actually aligned, and we can see that the tile actually takes the format of a portrait, but the image obviously is in a landscape format, so it only takes up half the size. Now we can solve issues like this by going back to our grid and using the background image option here. So I scroll down again to fixed thumbnail dimensions. Right under it, I select set as background images, and we can see what this looks like. And there we go. So we have a perfectly aligned grid. So you saw what I did here with this tile here. If in the event you don't have an image that's cropped to the tile, just set it as a background image and it will align perfectly. Now, another interesting setting that we have here is the ratio setting. And this becomes useful, especially if you're using a background images, because maybe you want your tiles to be calculated in size differently. So for example, say that you wanted them as squares. So I'm going to switch this to 1. Obviously, you can play around with the thumbnail ratio to see the different effects it has on the grid. I'm just going to reload this and we can see what this looks like. This is obviously going to look quite funky because obviously the images aren't cropped for this, but you get the idea. So this is how you play around and give the tiles different ratios. Now that I've done that, I'm going to show you some other settings here that relate to the width of the grid. So I'm going to scroll back down here again, and this time we are going to change the width of the grid from a fixed width to a full width. So I just do that under width, and then I'm going to go ahead and change the number of columns as well. So let's switch to 4 columns, and I'm also going to go ahead and change the gutter sizes here. So I'm going to set that to small, and we can see what this looks like. And there we go. So we have a full width grid with small gutters. We've changed the ratio so that the image's width is equal to the height. And we can see also that we've swapped the number of columns. And just for illustrative purposes here, I'm just going to switch the gutters here to none. And we're going to switch this to a 5-column grid as well. And there we go, we have a 5-column grid that's evenly aligned. Obviously, I would need to add another image here. And that's basically it when it comes to structural aspects of the grid.